You know it's this. Take a perk and a talk of that shit. Money swallowing like sis. Did it perfect in the kid. Got a billion who sang on my head. Look up better. Put on the road I just spent. I know we got $1 million. The devil that shit ain't not cheaper again.
Hello and welcome back, fellow anime lovers, to MangaMuse. I am delighted to have you join us once again in the world of fanfiction and fantasy. This is the second part of What If Deku Meets Chaotic. Special note, this fanfic is written and a masterpiece of HanBaron on FANFICTIONnet. Do check and support the author too. Now smash the like, share and subscribe button for more. Also press the bell icon so that you never miss such great parts. Thanks for the introduction. Now let's dive into the world. Aha! Man, so much for that scan quest. Peyton says while stretching out his back. He and Kez had spent the last week or so trying to scan Hifton and some of the gear he had stolen from the Underworlders. Only for the orange creature to blink away as they got close. Kez groaned as well before saying, "At least we got a Burathian axe and a Muge's tuning fork before they all disappeared." Peyton sighed before saying, "True. True. But it would have been nice to get a scan of that high-speed hopper to boost out Dex." As they were talking, they both noticed Tom and Sarah talking at their usual table. Sitting very close to one another. "So, do we tell them that we know about them?" Kaz said with a smirk. Peyton rolled his eyes before saying, "Nah. They'll speak up when they want to. Besides, it's kind of funny at times to see them try and pretend nothing is going on." He then waves and calls out, and the pair freak out a bit and quickly separate. Hey Peyton. Kaz. Any luck?" Sarah says with a brushing of her hair. Kaz lets out a bit of suffering sigh before saying they lost Hifton. "Right as we were about to scan him, Bigfoot here broke a branch." "Whoa bro. What makes you think it was my fault?" Peyton says before asking a robot to bring some food and drinks. The group discuss a few other plans and how some of their next few matches could stack up and go. And Kez brings up something important to Tom. "So have you gotten a challenge from Codemaster Tyrosus yet?" Tom gives his friend a sideways look before saying, "Not yet. But I know it'll come soon. I've already got 7 wins there. So she'll probably call soon enough." Peyton cheers a bit before saying Tom would be a bit of a record breaker in chaotic. "I mean, you've beaten 3 Codemasters already. Sure, you lost to Imthar before, but still. You've won 3 Codemaster matches and have tons of cool new locations and creatures. Lots of folks have been betting on you to be the first who could beat all of them." Peyton says in between sips of his soda. But Tom seems conflicted and confused about something. Kez asks what was wrong, but Tom deflected by saying he was thinking about Izuku. He's been through a lot and... well, I kinda worry about him, you know. I hear ya bro, kid lives in a pretty messed up world when you think about it. Peyton says while accepting the food he ordered from the robots. Sarah then says, "It's like everyone in his world is becoming some kind of creature. And they want to enjoy it so much that they've forgotten or gotten rid of a lot of the better parts of being human." Kaz sighs and agrees. "At least we've given him something a bit nicer here. If only for a while. Though what if he could become a creature himself? Think that would help in his world?" The rest of his friends laugh at the idea with Sarah saying, "Yeah, sure it would. But there's no way to use a scanner for that outside of chaotic." In Izuku's world, the boy was just waking up after looking over his cards the night before. Normally his mother would be calling for him, but she decided to go out early to get some morning deals from the store. Which left Izuku alone to be concerned with his strange new state of being. "What the hell?" Izuku exclaimed in a voice that was not his own. And was looking at a face that was not his own. He looked in the mirror and saw that he looked like the creature he was looking at the night before, Prantix. He looked over his green skin and now red hair and eyes with confusion and a bit of panic. "What is happening? What is happening?" Izuku repeated to himself a few times while looking at his strange appearance. Compounded when he started generating fire from his hands. Quickly trying to douse it in the sink. After it had been put out though, stones appeared and started to fill up the sink as well. Izuku started hyperventilating until he felt a memory that wasn't his. Calm down and relax. Feel the power of the Kataka and elements ebb and flow. And you'll be able to control your attacks. The one who had been saying this was likely the creature Prantix's father. Given what Izuku was seeing in the memories. Once he did just as the images instructed, he wasn't producing flames or pebbles anymore. Okay, that's one problem down. Now I just need to wait. My scanner. Izuku quickly rushed back to check his scanner and saw that it was still on the image of Prantix where he left it. Okay. So somehow, I turned into a creature without being directly connected to chaotic or the battledromes. So to turn back, do I need to? He pushed a few buttons but nothing happened. Izuku? Are you up? Hurry up. You have to get to school. Inko said as she was coming back into the apartment. And Izuku was panicking more and more given how strange his appearance was now. He kept pushing button after button while he heard his mother coming toward his room. And when Inko opened the door, her normal son was standing there and looked to be changing. Oh, sorry honey. I guess you were still getting ready. I'll make you a quick lunch for today. Yeah, thanks mom. Izuku said with some confusion and mystification. He looked at his scanner and figured out what he needed to do to get back to normal. Or at least human. Maybe I should experiment with this a bit. Izuku thinks as he was getting ready for school. Rather than transport his code to chaotic for the day, Izuku chose to wait until after school to start experimenting with his scanner. While having to deal with the annoying matter of his teacher talking about all the students wanting to be heroes. Not like most of them really could do it. Kacchan is the only one who has a really capable quirk. These rest frankly they might as well all be bodles. Izuku thinks with a smirk. Hey Deku. What's that smirk for? Bakugou shouts in front of Izuku's desk after bragging the whole while. Izuku lets out a humorless laugh before saying, oh nothing much. Just thinking that most of them really don't have any potential to be a hero. You're about the only one who maybe could. But I'm not so sure your attitude can do it. While most of the class rages about Izuku saying none of them have the potential, while also saying he was useless, Bakugou laughed and agreed with him. I get what you mean about the rest not having potential. I guess that's what some of these notes are about. Ha. Lemme dash. As Bakugou was reaching for Izuku's notebook, the green teen grabbed his wrist and pulled him forward into a trip. Thanks for the hand-to-hand lessons, Ivena. Izuku thinks as Bakugou stumbles a bit. Whatever. But he is right. I'm the only one here who has any chance of being a hero. Bakugou brags while the rest of the class heckles him a bit. Some of the others wonder if Izuku really intends to attend UA as well. Maybe he's just looking to go general course. I mean, it wouldn't be a bad thing. Maybe he'll be a support or business course. He's plenty smart. So he could do a lot of good that way. Not to mention it's about all a quirkless nobody like him could do. Izuku ignored all of these comments and brushed past Bakugou when classes let out. He walks toward a quiet area of town before experimenting with his scanner. Eventually finding that he could transform into a creature after a couple of tries and testing. Now let's see maybe. Lickalizer. Izuku says before flipping to said battle gear and trying to make it appear. But it didn't work right away. He hummed before equipping the card onto the creature he was transformed into. And then he could summon it to his hand. Izuku smirked while nodding. Okay. That answers that. I need to set my team or creature and gear before trying to use anything. Maybe Izuku starts before mumbling and transforming a few more times and trying out a few devices away from others. Ha. Once again, it fits to be called green might like this. Izuku says while transformed into Maxer once again. He fiddled with it a few times as he started walking towards a tunnel. And then heard a gurgling from a sewage drain. Maxer's instincts kicked in as Izuku jumped back, put his scanner away and then pulled out his localizer. Well now. You seem like you're up for a fight. But that gun won't do you any good. A guy the sludge-like entity started. But he couldn't finish as Izuku blasted him with a freeze shot from the battle gear. Well, that was easy enough. Though I have to wonder what I should do now. Izuku thought aloud while looking at the strange heteromorph. I never thought about it given how normal it all is and the love heroes get, but are quirks really a good thing? When you end up like this thanks to one. Izuku thinks before freezing the villain a bit more. And then a manhole was launched from just beyond the tunnel. Halt, villain. For I am here to be too late apparently. The one saying this was the current #1 hero, All Might. Standing opposite of Izuku and the sludge entity. He looked over Izuku's current form and was interested. And a bit impressed. It's rare to see someone my own height and build. Not to mention he seems well-meaning enough. Though I don't know all of the details given what I'm seeing. All Might thinks while sizing up Izuku. He clears his throat before saying, I must thank you for capturing this criminal. He'd gotten away from me due to his better knowledge of the sewers. Who might you be? Me. I'm Green Might. Not the most original, I grant you, but well, I think you can guess why I'd call myself that. Izuku said while trying to cover up what happened. I'm still not sure on everything with this. And it might be better that I don't draw too much attention right now. All Might nods before asking if he was a new pro hero or if what happened was an accident of some kind. Kind of. I was just walking when he lashed out towards me and I froze him. I reacted. Izuku says with a rubbing of his head. Getting nervous at the look All Might was giving him. The pro hero hums before noting that Izuku took the villain down illegally. You may have been acting in self-defense, but I still need you to explain the details, sir. All Might says with his eyes narrowing. Then asking for him to put the weapon down and come with him. Izuku gets nervous and wonders why All Might was treating him as much like a criminal or a danger as the villain. When he walks forward, Izuku panically fires off a sleep sting attack into the hero. Knocking him out cold. Oops. I may have overreacted. Izuku says before leaving and turning back into himself. And then calling the police to have them pick up All Might and the villain. That could have been worse. And better. Wonder what else I could do. As Izuku was walking through the city, he was suddenly knocked over by a little girl with white hair and a horn coming out of her head. Eri? Where are you? Come back here, right there you are. Izuku hears as a man with a beak-like mask appears and looks down at Izuku and the now named Eri. I'm sorry about this, young man. She ran off without telling me. Come on, Eri. Let's go home, the man says with a look that seems to have a mixture of anger and loathing in it. Eri looks up toward Izuku in worry, and the boy knows something is wrong. He picks himself and Eri up before saying, she seems worried or scared of something, sir. And it looks like she's been hurt quite a bit. Izuku notes her arms are bandaged and she was wearing a very worn-out dress. But as he's saying this, he can feel the bloodlust coming from the man as he reaches for both of the children. Excuse me. Is there a problem here? A new voice rings out. This being the blue-haired and skinned hero Bubble Girl. She looks between the children and the masked man with some suspicion. And the man clears his throat before saying there was no problem. My daughter is a bit accident-prone. That's the reason for the bandages, young man. I'm hoping she isn't hurt again and that we should really be getting home. Izuku still feels like something is wrong and wants to disagree, but Bubble Girl stops him. Have a good day, sir. I'll escort this young man home, she says with a bow. Making Izuku do the same. And with that all parties take their leave. Something is really wrong with him and her, I know it. Why didn't you do anything? Izuku asks as they leave. Bubble Girl just sighs before saying, I know. And we do know that he's up to no good. But I or any hero can't really do anything. Not yet. We need more evidence to get warrants and the like. Izuku looks up to her in a bit of shock and asks, but by then she could be hurt even worse. Or she may end up dead. You can't think this is right. The pro-hero sighs before agreeing with Izuku. But it is the law. I can't act before a case can be made. And thus Izuku is told to drop it and leave the matter to the authorities and heroes. Do they really deserve to be called heroes? Izuku starts to think after returning home. He had been considering everything he'd seen in his life and what it meant to be a hero. And how it compared to what his friends in Chaotic had talked about and experienced. How they had helped save the tribes and their people, despite their lack of powers. How the comics they had all read were ones where the heroes would do all they could to save and protect. Even if the laws didn't allow it. Meanwhile, this world is one that has been touted up as comic book world brought to life. But everything is built around the laws and what define as hero that way. Be that licenses or quirks. Izuku thinks aloud while scrolling through his cards. He hums before pulling up his code to Chaotic and transporting there. When he arrives, he goes to the usual table and sees Kaz sitting there. Hey Izuku. Coming in a bit later today. Izuku shrugs and says he had something he wanted to test back home. So whatcha watching? Izuku asks following Kaz's gaze. And he sees Sarah in a match. Sarah's been facing a pretty tough opponent. Even with her Danians. He's known as Marillionaire. Because that's his specialty. Izuku nods before watching the fight. Sarah had spun her location randomizer and it came up the nest of the ancients. Ikyud attacks Myheroacademia. Sarah announces before turning into said creature. And facing off with the Marillion chieftain. Think you can really pull this off, Chowdy Queen, the transformed opponent says with a watery roar and thoughts. Ikyud smirks before saying, I've still get enough of the strength of my hive. Let's get chaotic. The scene shifts to the nest of the ancients and Ikyud is quickly making his way around the location. Using some secret passages. Sarah knows from a few of her visits. If I can get in a good position, I can really lay the hurt on this guy, she thinks as she passes the audience chamber Izuku had seen before. Myheroacademia floated around the areas of nest to try and track his opponent down. Only to get blasted from behind by a strong lavalanche. Ikyud leaps down and keeps firing earth attacks but gets blasted by a powerful water blast from the chieftain. The Danian then takes a powerful riptide before activating the power of the hive to regain energy. Try this. Granite Ball. Ikyud shouts before launching a barrage of stones. The attack knocks the Marillion closer to the ground and then is wrapped up in a vine snare to be slammed into the walls. Enough. Intimidating melody of Mar, the chieftain shouts as he casts the music. Crippling the power of Ikyud. Even with his hive. He fell to the ground with a groan. Oh man. Ikyud's energy is down to almost 10. Izuku says with worry. Kaz agrees but tells Izuku not to worry too much. She's still got a chance to win this fight. And that comes from one last action. You aren't the only one who has a music left. Purge Dirge. And with that, the music causes 15 damage and knocks Myheroacademia to the ground. Now you're done. Rock Wave. Ikyud shouts with a punch to the ground and launches the stones to the Marillion. Reducing it to code. And that basically puts an end to the match. Even though he still had one Marillion left, Sarah's opponent failed to best her Wama. Especially when she broke out a Bimaurcils to catch up to the Nunkworn as he tried to fly away. You're not getting away. Sludge Gush. Wama shouts after calling on his hive again to recharge energy. And then rushes toward the purple Marillion. Who unleashes the strongest fire attacks at the creature. Only for Wama to smirk while thinking, I'm borrowing this from you Kaz, before firing a rust toxic attack to slow her opponent. But it doesn't completely cover the Marillion, leaving one arm open to firing attacks. As she was getting close, Sarah leapt from the machine to safety, while letting the bimotorcycle crash into his opponent and reduce it down to chaotic code. The winner, Chowdy Queen, the Drill Master announces as Wama turns back to human. She tells Marillionaire good match before leaving. Upon returning to her usual table, she is surprised and happy to see Izuku. Hey Izuku. Good to see you again. Something happened today? Sarah asked before getting a drink from a robot. Izuku looked down before saying he wanted to ask them something. It's kind of important. Izuku says with a conflicted look. Kaz hums before saying they should wait for the others, quickly calling Peyton and Tom who were in Param. Once they arrived, Izuku relays what had happened and his conflicting ideas. I want to be a hero. But after thinking about some of what that means in my world, well, I'm just not sure they can really get things done. At least not that effectively. It's a bit crazy that you can turn into a creature in your world now. We can't do that. Maybe it's some of the weird situation with you in general. Peyton comments with some awe. Kaz tells Izuku he's jealous because he could prove that it was a real place, like he'd been trying to do for years. Tom though seems mad about the situation of Eri and that the heroes couldn't or wouldn't do anything. It's the laws, Tom. Because of how weird everything is over there, the heroes can't operate like we normally think heroes do. Sarah says while putting her hand atop his. Izuku notices this but pushes it aside to ask what Tom would do. He looks to Izuku and knows exactly what his own answer would be. If I were you, I'd try to save her myself. But I'm not you. I want you to save her, but it matters more if you want to save her. So that's the real question, do you want to help her? The younger teen is a bit wide-eyed and asks if this had ever come up while they'd been playing. Kaz jokes and notes that Tom had habit of jumping in to help creatures and even some players whenever he could. Izuku smiled before thanking the teens. I think I know what I not just want but should do. He then returns to his world and gives his other self the bit of courage or will he was missing. Okay. Time to set up my battle team. Izuku thinks aloud before fiddling with his scanner and choosing a handful of creatures to practice with over the week. Hold on Eri. I'll get you out of there. Izuku hummed while looking at his cards, contemplating each that would be useful for the fight to come. I need to get the girl out first, so it would be better to use. Yeah. Gotta go with a Mypedian. Maybe Jada. Given I'm Green Might, still sticking with Maxer. And then Dash. Overthinking things again you DMN nerd? Izuku hears behind him. He turns and sees Bakugou stalking him. He looks ready for a fight, but that is nothing new for him. Izuku rolled his eyes and barely acknowledged his bully. But that only incises Bakugou and he gets ready to strike Izuku, only to be surprised when the nerd dodges him nonchalantly. How? What? Why are you dodging? The blonde exclaims. Because I don't want to get hit. Izuku says flatly. The brat snarls before standing to strike again, only to be met with Izuku's elbow to his face. While he is groaning in pain, Izuku finally addresses Bakugou. Can you not be picking a fight for 10 seconds? I want to talk to you about something. Bakugou sniffles a bit and wipes a bit of BLD away before being surprised by the look in Izuku's eyes. He stops wanting to fight for a moment and is willing to listen to what Izuku has to say and talk about. So the pro didn't or couldn't do anything because they need to make a case or whatever about it. Guess that's the side we don't know about. Bakugou says while sitting on a wall. He notes that he'd still want to fight them and be the hero for that girl. It's more than you can do. But then again, I'd probably get arrested for doing vigilante stuff. If you had some way to fight and without a quirk, you wouldn't have anything to worry about. Not like that's possible. Izuku subtly rolls his eyes but does agree with the explosive blonde. He doesn't thank Bakugou and reminds him that they were a little late. Let's hurry. I don't know about you, but I don't want to have to listen to a lecture from the teacher. Izuku says before running off. Bakugou yells at Izuku, but he leaves the matter alone for the time being. What's he thinking? Or planning, whatever. It's not like he can really do anything. He's just a Deku. While Bakugou is thinking this, Izuku is scheming and planning his next moves. After school, he heads for the woods around Dagoba Beach. Good place to at least start. Now then. I'll keep it simple and use Maxer, with a Cyclance. And I'll include a Geo Flourish to test it out. With that, Izuku transforms into the hero of the overworld. Right. First things first. Maxer says before summoning his Cyclance. He tests a few attacks on the piles of garbage. Melting some with fire, burying and compressing them with earth, and testing the shock and other potential of the Cyclance. Barely noticing that someone else had arrived. That being Yagi Toshinori, or All Might. He was currently in his true form and was inspecting the area as a place to potentially train a successor. Or just somewhere he could clean as well. We all do forget where many heroes began and... Well now. This is interesting. He steps out and sees the strange person he met the other day as All Might. And he was currently damaging a large amount of garbage. To the point some of it was going out into the ocean. Little much don't you think, he called out after getting out of his car. Izuku as Maxer was a little surprised to see anyone, but he did what he could to not let it show. Who's this guy, was Izuku's main thought, and he later voiced that. Toshinori just introduced himself as Yagi and said he was an associate of All Might. He mentioned you in passing. What are you doing out here? The deflated hero asked with a slightly suspicious look. Izuku cleared his throat and tried to come off as accurate to the character as possible. I've recently learned how to do many special things. And I wanted to test them in a place where no one could get hurt. Or possibly turn me in. Toshinori nods but asks what Green Might could do that would require that. And the size of his eyes matches the size of his pecs in buff form when he sees Green Might unleash a torrent of lava, a few fireballs, and then a punch created a ridge of rock. The Green Man chuckled before saying, yeah. So, you can see why I'd like to be safe about this. Let alone finding a bunch of these. He gestured with his Cyclance, and then used a tornado tackle through it as well as a lightning burst. The pro has to pinch himself before letting out a slightly maddened chuckle. Okay. Weird, and I guess that means you technically didn't freeze that villain with your quirk. But instead did it thanks to some strange support item. Sure, let's go with that. Green Might says and then tries to move the conversation along. He asks that Toshinori keep quiet for now. I'm not really ready to reveal a lot of things given I don't know much about my abilities. I didn't have any for a long time. Toshinori notices the slightly sad way the man from his perspective said that, and he had a feeling on the situation. A very late awakening or something. So you've never had training or anything like that? Izuku clears his throat and says it was something like that. The blonde man nods and agrees to keep it a secret for the time being. But you still should register the changes eventually. Just to be safe. Green Might gives a slow nod before changing the subject to ask what Toshinori was doing there. Only for him to acknowledge he was there for similar reasons to Green Might. Mostly in that this place is out of the way. The two share a smile and Toshinori offers to have a truck brought out so the man could clear or move the pieces of trash better than with just blasting things. That would be helpful. Thank you. Green Might says with a hand extended. And Toshinori shakes it with a smile on his face. Once he was gone though, Izuku let out a sigh of relief. Okay. Gonna have to try some other things and maybe work on avoiding people. As best I can. Izuku says before deactivating his transformation. He sighed before thinking about the next ways to use his new abilities. Well. It might be best to get more comfortable with Jada. I don't play as a Mypedian that often. Izuku muses before switching to said lizard and pulling up a Destructizoka card. As well a fanfare of the vanishing music. Gotta test these sooner or later. Once he had turned into said creature he took a breath to try and turn invisible. Like Tom and Peyton said. Go with the Mypedian I'm in or transformed into. Whatever. Izuku thinks before doing just that and vanishing. He then tries out a few air attacks and other skills as the sun starts to set. He then realizes that he could get into trouble with his mom if he doesn't tell her what is going on. So he sends a quick message to say he got caught up with something and would be a little late for dinner. Man, that is weird to say aloud when I look like this. Izuku thinks this while looking at his reflection in the water. He sneaks around a bit, even getting used to Jada's ability to climb along walls. Letting him keep a close eye on some of the goings-on. In one alley, he hears a scream and goes invisible to see what was wrong. He spots a pair of larger thugs intimidating a young woman. Though the woman in this case was rather large herself. Looking like a teal fox. But yet the two around were pushing her around and down. Now then, how about you hand over your money? That or we could find an alternate solution, one says with a poke toward the woman's chest. And before she can cover up, the villain who had hidden claws from his saber-toothed cat Quirks slashed her shirt. Making her BRST spill out and her squeak in fear once more. Izuku snarls before calling out, lightning burst, and shocking the cat villain, then using his tail to wrap up and body slam the villain. Why you little, whoa, whoa, the other says before Izuku starts to use a tornado tackle and makes the villain spin and fly in the air. And when he lets it up, the villain is dropped in the trash. Are you alright? Jada asks before extending a hand to the woman. She doesn't move her arms given her current state of dress, and the lizard-like being looks around and rips off some of the shirt on the first villain. This should help for a minute. The woman has tears in her eyes before gently taking the cloth. Izuku turns his back and waits for the girl to be decent. Thank you. Who are you, Mr. Lizard? She says while wiping the tears from her eyes. I'd like to know that as well, a new voice calls out. From the shadows, a black-haired man with a black body suit and a long scarf around his neck appears. He has a very scruffy face and tired look in his eyes. And his eyes were fixated on Izuku, or rather Jada. So. Care to tell me who you are? The man says before his eyes flash red and his hair rises. Izuku narrows his own while contemplating who this could be. Given the entrance, the hair, and that glare, gotta be Eraserhead. But I don't think he can counter my invisibility. Though I guess I could give him them. An answer. You can call me Hide Sight. And you'll see why soon enough. Jada says before checking again to see if the girl was alright. He notices that the two villains were starting to wake up and he quickly cast Wall of Flame to stop them. Eraserhead is shocked as he knows he's using his quirk to negate what he believed to be a quirk. I just stepped in because someone needed help. And I don't plan to ignore that. So long. Jada says this before turning invisible and surprising both observing. Once a fair distance away, Izuku sighs before sneaking around more and getting a feeling for how long he could stay invisible. He was near the outskirts of the city, and he saw another group of people being threatened. From their appearances and what he overheard some saying, the ones being attacked were quirkless. Let's get rid of these Neanderthals. Yeah, they don't belong in our world. They should have died out long ago. Izuku growls in anger and recorded some of what was said. And then he grabbed his fanfare of the vanishing and asked it to hide the victims. And it did just that to the shock of the villains. You called them Neanderthals. I'd say every one of you are the devolved ones in this place. Izuku says while staying invisible. The bigots look around and try to find the source. But they instead get shocked or blasted with wind before they can react. Where are you? One who got sent through a wall screams. After she steps out to find her enemy. Izuku climbed along the wall he sent the villain through and slipped behind her. He put his clawed fingers next to her neck and whispered, "Here. Lightning burst. The electrifying attack paralyzes and knocks out the villain as Jada appears. It should be okay now. Are you alright? The vigilante young man asks as the music starts to wear off. The family gulps before recoiling because of his appearance. Izuku chuckles while thinking, I wonder if this is some of what those who hate mutant types feel. Can't exactly blame them though. If they've had to deal with this more than once. He tells them he means them no harm and that he just happened upon someone who needed help. Who are you, mister? A little boy asks while looking up at Izuku. And he relaxes his eyes before saying he was hide sight. It fits for a very good reason. Be careful. With that, Izuku turns invisible and slips away before recovering his phone and sending the recordings to Heroes and the police. He returned home and rested up for the night. Though he laughed as his hide sight persona was lauded as a hero to an extent. Given he saved a few different people. But Eraserhead calling him tantamount to a villain was infuriating. Not like he did much of anything. Izuku mutters with annoyance. He sighs before using his scanner to send himself to Chaotic. He met up with Payton to ask for something special. I need an interlude of consequence music. Do you know where to get one? That's a pretty big ask, little bro. But I do know the fella who makes that music. We need to head to Raupa Sok. I'm sure Sobjek has a few. And he's a good buddy. The two port to Param and meet with the High Muge of the Mypedians. Who is happy to let some be scanned. You have aided the Mypedians and many others of Param more than most chaotic players. It would be rude to not reward such compassion. Izuku thanks the Muge before asking if he could scan him as well. And with permission given, Izuku has the power of the lizard wizard. They explore around a bit more and Izuku gets some new scans. Including a new scan of Intress. Nature Force? Ha! Well, the extra elements and this ability will be pretty helpful. Izuku thinks after scanning the Tiger Woman. With that done, Izuku participated in a few chaotic matches and went over some details with Payton on what some music and gear could do. Hey, listen, I know you're planning to go all superhero and save that girl. But it would probably be a good idea to get some info on the guys you're going against. Payton notes that his own encyclopedic knowledge of chaotic has helped him plenty of times. And while not the same kind of power, battle, or challenge, one thing was constant. Knowledge is power, bro. And if you don't know what you're up against, then you could be powerless. I had been considering that, but I wasn't sure on the best way to go about it. Not like I can sneak around those thugs without knowing who they are and where they might live or anything. Izuku says while looking over some cards. Well, then you just need to steal the info from someone who has it. Kaz said this as he was returning from a scan quest. He sat down and reminded Izuku that there was someone already making a case. That probably means they have what you need. You just have to get it from them. Or copy it at least. Izuku is a little wide-eyed at the implication, but he can't deny the potential and advantage it would give him. Before Izuku ports back though, Kaz stops him. Listen. I'm guessing you might be going for a mixed team. So I have a suggestion to slow or turn the tides. He then brought up an image of Magmon, but he looked very different. This is Magmon the Retaliator. Extra elemental power and energy. I'd be willing to trade it. If you've got a few new pieces of battle gear. Kaz says with a cunning smirk. Izuku thinks a moment before bringing up a few things he'd scanned. Maxer's torch, Mypedian fulgurite, and Elementalist's pauldrons. Not bad, but I think I'll go with the fulgurite. I'm usually not one for elementalists and I don't have a Maxer. Kaz says before setting his scanner into the trade table. Izuku spends the next few hours in the dromes and around the port court. After catching a few ZS in a monorail, he ported back to his world. Roughly when his home self would be waking up to get ready for school. Well, that was a productive night, I guess. Something special for the strongest or leader. Now I'll have to think more on what they said. Izuku's day goes about as normal. And in the afternoon he practices and helps as both Maxer and Jada. Before switching to a different one. That being his new Intress scan. This is so weird being in a female body. I wonder if this is what it's like for trans people. Izuku questions before leaping around the woods and practicing some attacks. Impressive acrobatics, young lady. And I have to wonder if you are related to Big Red Dot with those water manipulations. Izuku hears after unleashing a riptide attack. He turns and sees someone. Intimidating and opposite to his current power set. That being the number 2 hero, Endeavor. Though without his flame roiling. Izuku gulps before trying to talk to the flame hero. He first tries to pitch his voice up but remembers that he was already in a female form. Really gotta get used to this. Cough. Yes, Hello Endeavor sir. I'm a little surprised to see you here. This isn't your area of jurisdiction. No. But it is near my home. And I used to train out here until... Well, it doesn't fully matter. The man seems melancholy and introduces his family name instead since he was out of uniform. Izuku or Intress notices the sadness as he looks around the area. But doesn't ask right away as the teen has to come up with an excuse as to why he was there. He coughs again before saying, I was practicing. I've never been able to do some of what you've seen before. And it felt risky to try anything without learning what could happen. Todoroki Enji as he introduced himself nodded and commended her for that. I've never heard of a late bloomer that came about at your age. But quirks are quite strange. And I'm glad to hear that a young lady like yourself is taking the time to learn that there can be complications if you try to do too much. Izuku notices the sad look once more and decides to broach the question of what was bothering the hero. I've got time. I'm willing to listen. Besides, it could do some good to talk about it. Enji looks to the young lady, then down to the ground, and then his own hand as he created some flames. He sighed before beginning his tale about his eldest child. My son had the potential to become far more powerful than I could ever hope to be. I thought he could surpass me, and All Might someday. But there was a problem. While his power was growing, his body couldn't take it. He revealed that his wife had an ice quirk and that added to the complications. As his son's body was capable of handling extreme cold but not extreme heat. I tried to stop him. To talk him down and convince him to step away from the dream I pushed onto him. But he was as stubborn as I am. Maybe more so. His power consumed him, didn't it? Intress finished with a sad look toward the man. Who just nodded and said all they found was a piece of his jawbone. Since then I've been doing everything I can to make sure my youngest won't fall into similar pitfalls. That he'll give it his all to prove what I sought wasn't entirely wrong. But once again the boy is so DMN stubborn. Intress laughs at this before saying that it might be some of the problem. You want so bad to prove you were right or that what you sought wasn't wrong. But that probably compounds the problem and matters. Maybe let go. That or you need someone else who can show him his weaknesses. Though not an adult. You may be right. Are you going to keep training out here? I wouldn't mind overseeing. Maybe introduce you to my family. I think my second son is around your age. Izuku has a minor freak-out moment about that and just says it would be fine. And that he should be getting home. Bounding off in a panic. Izuku shivers after getting away and shouts, okay. Didn't need to think about that. He had changed back to human once more and decided to test out something else. He turned into Vidav and used a magician's lyre to give himself a third magician. He then went over toward Mustafa General Hospital. Phew. Okay. Let's try a little something else. Izuku thinks before sneaking to the hospital as the sun was setting. He closed his eyes, put his lynx-like ear to a window, and listened to what some of the doctors and nurses were talking about. Noting the wing and area where some of the worst injured or ill people were. Especially that one guy. I think Recovery Girl is or has been treating him for a while now. Yeah. Over in the East Wing with some of the severe trauma victims. Izuku or Vidav nods and starts to climb up and towards the wing in question. It's not quite the same, but he can feel some of the people below somehow. Probably has to do with Vidav's ability to heal. Now then. Song of Rejuvenation. Heal those within as best you can. Vidav calls out before unleashing his magician toward the floating music. While not an absolute heals, the music provides enough relief to some who were close to dying due to the injuries many of them had endured. And this is when Izuku went to use his magicians to heal a few others below. Not sure what happened to this guy. But he does seem like he need it. As does this lady. Izuku thinks aloud before sending his last two magicians to a pair he could sense. The first being Toshinori, who felt the original healing pulse and then what felt like a spirit enter him, and together they partially restored his stomach and lungs. He'd never be quite at his best, but his time limit was not dwindling anymore and he'd even regained some of his time. Able to go at least 6 to 8 hours instead of 3. The other was a sad woman who was broken by a bit of grief and the obsessive nature of her husband. And his brutal methods following the death of their oldest. This being Todoroki Rei. She felt the comforting light enter her and the heart behind it seemed to bring her peace and some more stability to her mind. Especially as she saw some memories of Izuku talked with Enji and could hear all of the regret in his voice. Izuku sighed once it was all done and rolled a bit of a KNK out of his neck. Well, that gives me an idea on how to make this work. Maybe I can more to save or help people this way. Izuku thought aloud and was surprised once again. Indeed you could, my good man. Izuku turned and saw an old woman in a uniform with a syringe cane and a belt buckle that had RG on it. Recovery Girl. I didn't actually think you were here when I listened in. Just trying to help. Izuku says while walking toward the edge of the roof. The heroine takes some measured steps toward the lynx man by her perception before asking a few questions. Led of which being why he didn't use his quirk to become a healing hero like her. This just made Izuku roll his eyes when he thought about the fact she was obsessing about quirks as well. It's not exactly something I was able to do for a very long time. It's kind of new. And it requires a few things. Besides, I'm not so sure heroes really are heroes anymore. You're talking about things like the obsessions with fame. Or the rumors surrounding Endeavor. Recovery Girl asks with a suspicious eye. Izuku clears his throat before saying he wasn't sure about the latter, but definitely the former. Too many have lost sight of what it means to be a hero, I think. And that's why I'm going a different way. With that, Izuku steps on the railing of the roof and leaps as hard as he can to reach a different building. Shocking Recovery Girl. She sees the hero getting further away and decides to leave it at that for the moment. Well played, Mr. Magic Cat. And thank you. Izuku went home and took care of his homework before pretending to be asleep. Once he was sure his mother was asleep, he opened his window to turn into Jada and climb down the side. He remembered the rough area he met Bubble Girl before and waited to see if she was still patrolling. Apparently, she was. As he spotted her walking with Centipeder toward what he assumed was the agency she worked for. Izuku kept up his invisibility and climbed up the side of the building in question. Only to have a minor geek-out moment seeing all of the All Might merchandise in the apparent boss's office. And quickly identifying the man. Sir Night Eye. He's the one who's looking to take down that group that has Eri. Izuku thinks with some panic. He shakes out of it though and listens in to hear what the heroes were talking about. Anything new to report, Iwata-kun? Night Eye asked. But Bubble Girl didn't have anything. Saying, we checked around the area, I found that boy and Overhaul's daughter. We didn't find anything though. Night Eye sighs before reminding her that she was supposed to give a joke to go along with her report. And since she couldn't come up with one, the office worker pro escorts her out to be subjected to tickle hell. Izuku is confused and a bit dumbfounded by all of this, but he sees it as a good thing. Especially when they all leave to discuss and carry out the punishment. Thanks for that, bubble girl. Your sacrifice will not be in vain. Izuku thinks before slipping into some vents to gain access to Nightie's office. Once inside, he checks the computer but finds it all locked by passwords. Luckily, Izuku has a few good ideas on the passwords. The first being the day All Might appeared as a hero in Japan. Second for the files, being when he first started working with All Might. Third, though, to get to the Shy Hisaki records Izuku was less certain of. He tried a few pertaining to All Might and Nightie's birthdays or even other noteworthy dates related to the pair. All while trying to ignore the laughter he could hear from Bubble Girl being tickled. That is just kind of twisted. But he's always been associated with All Might. Even if they aren't working together anymore. I wonder. Izuku muses aloud before typing in a different date. One that marked when the two stopped working together and Nightie went his own way. And that was the last password. Izuku sighs before opening the Shy Hisaki files and inserting a flash drive to copy everything. But he panics when he hears the door opening. He quickly pulls up the screensaver and covers up the drive as Centipeder and Nightie talk. Do you think they'll make a move soon, sir? The insect-headed man asks. Nightie sighs before saying he wasn't sure. With All Might around, most are less likely to cause trouble. But he could be waiting for something specific. Izuku tempers his breathing so the pros don't catch on to him and hopes they'll leave. I mean, it's crazy enough they were still in the office this late. It's after 2 in the morning. Izuku thinks while worrying about getting up for school tomorrow. The heroes talk a bit more before Nightie decides to let Bubble Girl go for the night. It is ridiculously late as is. And I haven't been sleeping much to get this profile and everything together. Hopefully we can put an end to this case soon. The two leave and turn off the lights as they go to release the younger sidekick. Izuku sighs before slinking back over to check the status of the copying. Happy to see that it was finally done. With that finished, he quickly closes the files and explorers and ejects his flash drive. I still have to build a plan, but now I have the information I need to take out the villains. Izuku says before returning to the vents to escape and then head home. Just a bit longer. Hold out a little longer, Eri. Okay. Now it's time to get this job done. I've got the details of where the base is. Not to mention the layout and the most dangerous members. I just need to get in, get Eri out, and then demolish these BSTRDS with every ounce of power I've got. Thinking about it, I don't sound that heroic when I put it that way. But whatever. I pulled out my scanner and brought up the battle team screen. Up front, I put Maxer, Jada, and Magmon. The first is for the obvious muscle and power. Jada will be needed for getting Eri out. While Magmon is just who I need to make a big entrance. At the rear, I'll put Vidav. That healing plus a song of rejuvenation will be very helpful. Second row, Intress would be a decent warrior, but I need someone else. Wait, no. Instead of her, I'll put Ivena and Nevena in the second row. I may be a bit warrior heavy, but that seems what I need for these guys. Not like I'm dealing with actual strategists or players. Most of them are just muscle. Okay. Let's get chaotic. I say before pushing the Jada image. After turning into the Mypedian, I go invisible and sneak along the walls of the building. I let up on my invisibility when I'm sure no one is around or there are no cameras. As I make my way towards the little girl's likely room. And I have even more incentive to take down these BSTRDS after seeing a lab structure. One that had multiple vials of BLD. And notes pertaining to them using Eri and her BLD to make DRGS and weapons. Seeing that scared little girl as nothing more than a renewable resource. Mostly thanks to the leader's quirk. I temper my anger for the moment and steal a flash drive to copy all of the data from the computers. as well as some samples of the weapons and DRGs they were making. Done. Now to get Eri out. I listen in to hear the way some of these thugs talk about her to find my way to her room. Inside I see her crying and scared. While the room had plenty of toys and comforts, there is no denying what this place is. It's her prison cell. I fiddle with the lock on the door and slip in while she is crying. Is someone there? She asks with tears running down her face. Sorry Eri, but I can't have you panicking when you see me. Sleep sting. I say quietly and impact on the girl. Unlike with All Might who just got drowsy, Eri actually falls asleep when she is hit. I pick the girl up and cover her as best I can with my form as I sneak her out the side of the building. Covering her more when I spot some cameras turning towards us. It take a few tense minutes, but I get her away from the Shy Hisaki base and I have her covered with a blanket on a rooftop a few blocks away. I brush her hair to the side with my claws as she snuggles with one of the stuffed animals I grabbed. Sigh okay. Now to get this job done. Time to break the true monster. Not what I am, or what Eri is. Chisaki is the only monster here. I think aloud before leaping from rooftop to rooftop. Once I'm in the alley opposite the building, I pull out my scanner and SWCH to the image of Magmon. Hope I don't burn or melt this thing when I need to change again. Well, let's get chaotic. I say before unleashing a lavalanche at the front gate. All of a sudden, those who weren't awake in the Shy Hisaki base were wrenched from sleep thanks to the attack Izuku unleashed on the front gate. The 8 bullets, thugs, and executives of the organization hurry to the front door to engage the intruder. Only to find a mass of lava, both on the ground and walking towards them. Do you know who we are and what we can do? Overhaul demands with a glare. Magmon smirks before saying, just a bunch of monsters that need to be taken down. That's all I see. Rich coming from you, the bulky Kendo Rappa says before demanding his partner Tengai make barrier so he can fight Magmon. While the monk does comply, it doesn't do much good for him or Rikiya who joined in on the attack. Both punch or grab at the villain. Expecting the flames to just be an effect or something to intimidate. Only to realize that Magmon was really made of magma and lava. Setting their hands ablaze. Rock wave. Izuku shouts before stomping and using the attack to send both men flying. He then holds up his hands and unleashes flame orb and steam rage attacks to do even more damage. While Rappa is mostly knocked out, Rikiya is even more consumed by the flames. When some of the thugs try to run or attack, they meet with similar fates. Except those who stuck to ranged attack while being protected by Tengai's barrier. Enough of this. Overhaul shout before slamming his hand on the ground and remodeling the whole area. He then drops the flame using Magmon into an area where he thinks his grunts will have a chance. Namely, a specially made area that had water all around from the plumbing. It did hurt Izuku a bit and he was still being attacked and swarmed by thugs. Alright. Time for a change, he said before firing an attack into the water. The mass of steam blinds the thugs and gives Izuku his chance to make the change. The thugs wander around and demand to know where Izuku was. Only for one to get kicked in the side of the head and another blasted by a power pulse. Where are you? One demands before hit with a power punch. When the steam clears, the ones still standing saw a strange woman before them instead of the magma beast they were fighting before. Ivena had arrived and made quick work of the rest of the grunts. That's at least done. Now then. Izuku said before adjusting her armor a bit. Still weird, but I think I'm getting used to it, he thinks while running out of the room. He then engages a few more thugs before finding another arena-like area. And he is attacked once more. This time by a few of the remaining members of the 8 bullets. Setsuno removed Ivena's gear, but he could barely lift the cyclones he'd stolen. Tabe tried to take a bite out of the warrior but she evaded. At least until she was struck from above by the crystal arms of Hojo. That should put the hurt on ya, the villain shouted. But to his, and Izuku's, surprised Ivena seemed less affected. It stings, yeah, but it oh yeah. While Nevena is on the board, Ivena becomes a defender. Izuku thinks before knocking the villain back and blasting him with an attack. Once he was done, she quickly dealt with the other two. On her way to find Chisaki, Ivena suddenly felt disoriented and dizzy. And then she was hit by attacks from a hat-wearing masked person, who started asking questions about who she was, where her accomplices are, etc. She then spots the person who was likely making her dizzy. A man with an odd bone-like mask that was chugging a bottle of alcohol. Smoke surge. Izuku shouted to distract her enemies. And made a change once again. I can't fight them directly, but in this form I won't have to. Izuku says with a smirk. The two villains continue to look for their quarry until they hear a strange sound. One that seemed similar to an instrument being played. Suddenly, they are both hit by powerful bursts of energy that they couldn't see coming. And in a few seconds, the bone-masked villain was out cold, while the hat-wearing interrogator was barely conscious. Sorry, but you won't be getting any real answers out of me, he hears before meeting a blue fist with his face. Nevena now stood before binding the men up and taking off once more. Once again, she quickly dealt with almost all of the villains and thugs that came her way, even taking out Tengai with another sneak attack. She was stopped though by another group of villains, namely the numbers 2 and 3 of the Shy Hisaki. Chronostasis stopped her in time with his quirk, and Mimic appeared out of his usual form to try and end the interloper. Good thing I added an extra magician earlier, Izuku said while unable to move. Nevena's eyes flashed, and once again, the two villains were hit by a force they couldn't see, which in turn lit up Chronostasis's quirk. Nice try. But it's a lot harder than that to take me down. Power slice. And two more are taken out of the fight. Now all that remained was the head of the Yakuza, Chisaki Kai. Nevena walked a bit before stumbling slightly. She called upon the power from Vidav to heal herself and push forward. I guess I took more hits than I realized. But I can't slow down now. And I don't have any more magicians. Luckily, I still have 2 last tricks if needed. Izuku thinks aloud before stumbling upon Overhaul. He was in a frantic state, ripping apart a room and screaming for Eri. Nevena chuckled before saying, she's long gone and far from your grasp. You monster. Overhaul snarls before slamming his hands on the ground to attack the Muge. Izuku dodges and fires attacks of his own to counter the villain. But neither has much luck in engaging or damaging the other. Even when Chisaki reformats the room to add more attacks in, he still can't get a solid blow. While Izuku can't land anything meaningful either. Every time I think I've got a shot, he pulls up that barrier and uses that to stop me. Chisaki is thinking much the same, but more curse words thrown in and dodging instead of barrier. While at a break in the fighting, Izuku catches his breath before making his next change. Time for Green Might to take the stage. Let's get chaotic one last time. With that, Izuku transforms into Maxer and surprises Overhaul with a rock wave and then a magma burst. And while it does some damage, Overhaul quickly puts himself back together with his quirk. He doesn't see a powerful punch, followed up by a power punch, coming though, and is knocked through a few walls. Just a bit longer. But I need to get him desperate to try anything. Then I can play my ace. Izuku thinks aloud before making a music appear. Izuku then uses a few more attacks against a Overhaul that seemed to be mixed with some dirt among other things and had 4 arms. The strange beast snarled out, it took a few of my other grunts, but at least I've got some more muscle and power to match yours. Izuku is appalled by the callous way he talked about his subordinates and using them as sacrifices. It seems I wasn't wrong in calling you a monster. I'm going to make sure you can't hurt anyone ever again. Overhaul roars about Izuku being all talk and tries to take him apart or just get close enough to end the hero. But Green Might keeps out of his reach just far enough and blasts back with some solid hits of his own. And when he does get close, Izuku powers up a sudden flare attack around his body that burns the creature's hands. The boss's frustration boils to a point that he slams his hands on the ground and sends Maxer up into the air, then pinning him with the stone spires. Now I can finish you. Though you are too far for me to just use my quirk on. And frankly I'd prefer to stay away from you. So I'll end it this way. Oh, I don't think so. Interlude of consequence. Disable overhaul. Izuku calls out as the music floats overhead and then plays. A beam of light shooting down on Chisaki as it continues to play. Once it is done though, the villain can't tell any difference and laughs at the hero's last-ditch effort. All for nothing. Too bad Eri can't see this. He slams his hands to the ground once more and launches a barrage or stone points to pierce Maxer. Only to be surprised when he can't actually control them and it ends up freeing the hero. He attacks a few more times but it still doesn't work like he hopes, culminating in him stabbing himself multiple times. No. I have to put myself back together. I need control. Overhaul says before touching himself. He thinks what he normally does to rebuild his body after an injury. However, two things happen instead. First, all of the goons he fused with are released. And second, he detonates his own body, ripping himself apart thanks to the power of the music. One of the thugs had been semi-conscious when this happened and was dumbfounded by what he saw. How that's not how you kill the boss, he screamed in panic. Green Might just walks forward before saying, I didn't. He did it to himself. I used something that disrupted his power. He tried to attack me, and instead attacked himself. He tried to put himself back together and... well, you see the results. The thug freaks out again and can barely stammer out a question of who he was. You can call me, Green Might. Izuku says before punching the thug across the face and knocking him out. He sighed before hearing more of the sirens going off outside. Time to make my exit and get Eri somewhere safe. Izuku says before pulling out his scanner and turning into Jada. Going invisible and evading the officers around. He returns to the roof he left Eri on and sees the girl still asleep. He smiles and quietly says, hopefully, there will be far less tears of fear that fall from your eyes, Eri. Now, let's get you somewhere a bit safer. He then quickly made his way to Sir Nightye's agency. Once there, he left the girl and the flash drive with all the evidence at the door. He had already seen Nighteye in his office, based on the glow from the computer. So he buzzed the front door and slinked off to let some good hopefully happen. When Nighteye arrived, he was dumbfounded by the little girl he knew was Overhaul's daughter on his doorstep. And even more so by the drive she had and all the evidence on it. He then got a call from an officer that the shy Hisaki had been taken down. Who could have was it? The same one who copied my files? Mirai said to himself. While he wasn't sure what to make of this turn of events, he did know what needed to be done first and foremost. Eri had just been sleeping on one of his couches as she started to wake. She looked around and was nervous about not being in her room anymore. Certain that Chisaki would punish her or anyone else who had spirited her away. It's all right, Eri. You're safe. Mirai said in a gentle tone. He kept his distance in case her quirk started up. And while she was glowing, what the hero said next calmed her down. If you're worried about Chisaki, you don't have to be. Someone took care of him. You're free now. To prove it, Nighteye showed Eri the computer screen and the destroyed Shy Hisaki headquarters. Including some images of the villains she knew were around. And how they were all injured to the point of not being a threat anymore. Including reading one very important thing. Chisaki Kai announced dead. Apparently, the result of an attack or ability that made his quirk rampage. And ripped him apart. Courtesy of a strange vigilante calling himself Green Might. Mirai said. Hearing that, Eri trembled before starting to tear up at the fact her tormentors were gone and she really was free. Her quirk shutting down, Mirai was at ease enough to come close and pat her head and reassure the girl. With Eri gripping his arm in happiness. Izuku meanwhile watched from across the street while still invisible. He smiled and a few tears fell from his hidden lizard face. Dang. Didn't know this could happen too. But good for you, Eri. Now, what happens next is up to you and no one else. He climbed up the side of the building and looked up to the moon with a smile. This is how I can be a hero. I can do a lot more good like this compared to what most who call themselves heroes can do. Izuku thought aloud before heading home. Izuku yelled in panic as he and Tom were running out of the bushes in the forest of life. Guess the look still isn't a fan of being scanned. Tom shouted while dodging a pebble storm attack. You think? Izuku shouts as they keep running through the brush. At least until they were standing above a waterfall. I'll get you yet, the horse-headed centaur said before stomping to launch a rock wave. Time to jump. Tom said while grabbing Izuku's arm. You are way too used to THSHTS. Izuku said before hitting the water. After they had swam for a bit and got to shore, Izuku grumbled about not getting new scan. At least until he saw a strange-looking creature running through the bushes with another chasing him. I'll get you Yokis. This isn't funny, the second creature yelled. Maybe not. But this is hilarious. Yoki shouts as he fires an attack that makes a log swing at the creature. Who dodges and taunts that they won't fall for that. Only for said log to strike another point and catapult the creature to the lake. Yoki's cackles incessantly before running off to his home. Wow. That was interesting. And so is that creature. I wonder what he could do for a team. Izuku said before going after the creature. Tom tried to warn Izuku away from the challenge, but the boy didn't listen. Funny how things repeat themselves. Tom said while watching Izuku fall victim to the various traps and pranks Yokis had around his house. Oh. Ow. Gross. Izuku said while pulling stickleberries out of his backside and wiping off the sludge he'd been covered in. Tom chuckles before saying, yeah, it seems like he's added more tricks and traps to his repertoire. How about we head back? Izuku nods before asking if Tom went through something similar. And the older teen has a complicated look on his face before admitting he did. Once they returned, they found their friends at their usual table. Hey, what ya guys watching? Izuku asked. Peyton greeted the pair and told Izuku they were watching Sarah's Codemaster match. But it's not going so good for Sarah Bear. She's down to her last creature and Codemaster Churl still has 3 creatures. To illustrate, Sarah was currently stuck with Kebna and being chased by Churl's own odd Danian. One that seemed more like an underwater insect. And was pounding away at her with water attacks. Sorry to say, Chaotic Queen, but you won't make it out of this battle. Rain spears. Kebna's eyes widened before sprinting off to avoid the attack. No choice, she thought before using her last music. Swarm Song, she calls out before the attack hits. And the resulting damage and one last chance Earth Pulse does enough damage to defeat the creature. It seems I was wrong. Well done. But was it worth it? Churl asked once they returned to the drome. Sarah looked down before admitting she wasn't sure. But I'll try to make the most of it. It was the Codemaster's attack, so he spun the location randomizer. Castle Rathwack is up, and Sarah has hope given Kebna had the earth element. But her opponent seemed to have it as well. Given the creature looked to be coated in rock and stone or made of it. Lothex attacks Kebna. Churl announces before touching the screen. Sarah mirrors this and turns into Kebna with a gulp. With a flash, the strange location was shown. Okay. I can do this. I can do this. I can gutch. Sarah starts before getting blasted in the back by a pebble storm. Lothex then bursts from the ground and uses a clean slide to rush forward and deal extra damage. Kebna shakes his head before using a Tectostrike to buy a moment to get away. It lands solid, but she doesn't notice it did far less damage compared to the usual power. Nice try. But that won't help you. Lothex says before sinking into the ground without digging. Tom notices this and lets out a sigh. I don't think Sarah's winning this match, he said while ordering some food. And while Izuku and the rest wanted to deny, they couldn't. It didn't look good. And it was paid off by Kebna getting pulled into a slow sand attack. He used a vine snare to try and pull himself out, but Lothex uses 2 more attacks to finish the match. First was a Sunder Ground to open up the earth beneath Kebna. And then Mineral Mayhem to do damage and cut the vines. Coating the Dannian Battlemaster and ending the match. Sarah walked back to their usual table before sitting in grumpy frustration. Man. I had some hope when I beat Slepta. But Lothex I barely had a chance to fight, she said before getting handed a soda from the robots. Yeah, I think that's thanks to its ability. I checked the stats, and Lothex has an ability to reduce damage taken from earth attacks. Let alone the boost he got from Castle Rathwack. Tom explained while trying to console her. But it has mixed results. He accepts that she was probably going to lose if that was the case. But that makes me all the more frustrated. I almost always use creatures that use elements. Kaz agrees and notes it was no different for most other players. Peyton chimes in with, that might just be his favorite strategy. Some of the best attacks require elements after all. And a lot of us build our decks around those ideas. Izuku hums before noting that he didn't often use elements in his fights. Well, except for when I fought the Yakuza. There I really needed to rely on elements given a lot of quirks need someone to be touching them to activate. Tom nodded and said he was proud of Izuku for stepping up like he did. And pretty smart giving those fake names for each creature. Gives you a good way to hide. As they were talking though, Tom got a call on his scanner. And who would appear on the screen but Codemaster Tyresis. Major Tom. I am contacting you to challenge you to a Codemaster match in my drome. If you accept, then meet me in 72 hours for your next challenge. Tom was wide-eyed by this but gulps and agrees to the challenge. Oh man. Another big one for you, Tommy boy. Hee ha. And if you win this one, it'll be 4 Codemasters you've beaten. Peyton says with a big smile and rough pat on Tom's back. Tom though looks uneasy before shaking his head and heading over to the trade tables. This could be pretty big. I've got to get ready for all of the challenges Tyresis could throw at me. Kaz agrees and they start working on a strategy. Izuku breaks up the thoughts by asking, what's a Codemaster match exactly? Peyton and Sarah look at Izuku funny but then remember that they stopped short with the explanations. Okay, we'll go over the basics, little bro. They explain how there is a Codemaster for each battle drome. Reminding him about the role they play in the pseudo-laws of chaotic. But aside from that, they also act like bosses in other games. Each of them has experience and creatures most of us have never used. Let alone locations that are pretty rare. Sarah says before Peyton takes over again. When you win 7 times in the drome, you challenge or might get challenged by a Codemaster. And if you win, then you can get one of their ultra-rare locations to scan even more crazy creatures and gear. And Tom's beaten 3 of them already. Izuku was wide-eyed hearing this and wanted some details from the older teen. But Tom was laser-focused on preparing and planning to face off with Tyresis. So Peyton pulls Izuku to the side and a different table to watch the records. After Tom had put together a rough lineup, Kaz excused himself to show Izuku some of his Codemaster matches as well. I may not have won as often as you, but I do have a few I'm proud of. With that, it just leaves Sarah and Tom at the trade table. Hey. You, okay? Sarah asks before sitting next to Tom. The black-haired teen sighs while looking at his scanner, deck, and lineup. Yeah, well, no. Not exactly. This just keeps making me think of the offer Krellin gave me. Sarah nodded before saying, the chance to be a Codemaster yourself, right? Tom nodded as Sarah took his hand. I know I have a pretty good record. But I'm surprised they offered it to me before a lot of others. Herculean would be one who would make a good battler if nothing else. Yeah, but there's one problem with him. He's way too caught up in trying to prove overworlders are better. And with as temperamental as he is to ones like Kaz, he wouldn't make for a sensible leader. Sarah reasons before reminding Tom of all the good he's done. Not just for Izuku or some other rookie players. But for Chaotic and even Param. You've been a friend and helper to all those who would need it. That's what I think really makes you Codemaster material, she says while tightening her grip on his hand. Tom smiles slightly before thanking her. Now I just need to show what I can do as just a regular player. Sarah and Kaz laugh at this before noting Tom wasn't an average player by any stretch of the word. Look at your team. Max are up front with Ulysses and that speed-boosted Mamark. Vlar and Korg in the middle, and I know that's your boosted Smilden in the back, she said with a raised eyebrow. Izuku meanwhile was wide-eyed at the creatures Tom had. Tom chuckled before saying he had to go over a few more details to get ready to face off with the Codemaster. And Izuku. You might want to go back and think a few other things through. The ones we talked about before we got attacked by Staluk. Izuku was a little surprised, but he agreed with his somewhat mentor and friend. Upon returning to his world, or just his memories, Izuku thought a bit more about what he'd asked. Namely whether he should use his scans to be a hero his world's way while attending UA. Or if he should try to keep the secret and stick to being a vigilante. I know I'd said or somewhat resolved to saving people that way after I beat the Yakuza. But there is a little something to wanting to hear more cheers for me. Even if it's just as my creatures. Izuku thinks aloud while looking at his cards. As the sun was going down in his world, he hums before sneaking out to help where he can. Namely by using Frafto to fly above the town of Mustafa and using his spectral viewer to watch the town. And one he saw was a young girl with short hair being accosted by some older teens. You really think you deserve to be some hero? All you can do is hide, the girl leading the group said while stalking up to the invisible teen. Izuku scoffed before drawing an arrow and firing down to startle the aggressors. He then rushes down and uses a dry liquid attack to knock them back. And then using an obscuring winds attack to make the aggressors flinch. However, Izuku didn't do any damage with the attack. Instead, he used the sub-ability to make himself much faster. Rapidly knocking away all of the bullies and then getting the invisible girl away. Who let out a squeal as Frafto picked up in a bridal carry. This should be far enough. You okay? Izuku asked after landing and setting the girl down. The girl gulped a bit before acknowledging she was okay. I'm Hagakure Toru. What's your name, sir? Izuku smiled before saying, Falcon Sight. You can call me that. What was that all about? Toru looked down before talking about how she was looking to apply to UA's hero program. But a lot of people don't think I can be a hero since my quirk just makes me invisible. The bird-like hero in her eyes scowled a bit before saying, that's mostly because they don't see other ways you can use it or assume you have no other way to use it. Like for example, perhaps you could redirect beam attacks or blind enemies depending how you use your quirk. He starts in on a small tangent, but the invisible girl gets his attention again. Sorry. My point is, you have just as much potential to be a hero as anyone. Besides, it's not always about power. At least if you can think of a way to turn it around, he said before bidding her farewell. Toru was a bit surprised but happy on the way the strange hero had supported or acknowledged her worth as a potential hero. Resolving more to make it into UA. Izuku flies over A to Hosu and swaps his creature. This time going for an underworlder. That being Ultitor and rapidly sprinting around the area looking for trouble. Eventually coming upon a troublesome hero. Sort of. Hold it right there. Izuku hears behind him and sees the turbo hero Ingenium following him. The hero was using his arms to try and keep up with the creature Izuku was turned into. But the teen wasn't going to make it easy for him. sprinting up the side of a wall to keep away. Ingenium is surprised but undeterred before using his arms to acrobatically leap up to the same level Izuku was at. I have to say, you surprised me. I've never seen someone with a quirk like yours. Let alone that you seem to be able to slow down when you want. But I have to at least stop you for disturbing the peace and illegal quirk usage. Izuku smiles to himself before saying, sorry to tell you. But I don't have a quirk. This surprises the hero and leaves him open for Izuku to use flash warp. Ingenium tries to move but the attack has left him petrified as Izuku walks past the man. Nothing personal. But I can't let you slow me down or stop what I need to do. Ultitor says before sprinting off and searching for his target. And eventually coming upon them. In a back alley one hero was trapped and at the mercy of a dangerous villain. The hero killer, Stain. Before the villain could use his chipped blade to finish the stopped hero, Izuku used his sickle-like right arm to cut the blade. And then his speed to knock the villain away. Are you okay? He asked while keeping a close eye on the villain. The hero acknowledged he was fine before noting he couldn't move. Likely this guy's quirk. But that still doesn't compare to what a creature can do. Stain shakes his head before drawing his knives to engage Ultitor. But he's not only too slow, but much weaker compared to his foe and Izuku defeated the villain in about a minute. Using a sleep sting and rust toxic to keep the villain from running away. Well, that's done. Let's get you out on the street with him. Izuku said before helping the hero up and picking up Stain. Once out on the street, many are surprised by Ultitor and Stain before quickly calling the police. As well as Ingenium who finally was released from flash warp. But before any could ask who it was that stopped the villain, Izuku sprinted away faster than most could perceive. Izuku smiles to himself before calling it a night and thinking about Tom's match that would be like. And I wonder when I'll have my first Codemaster match, he again thought aloud before making his way home and into bed. Izuku hummed upon arriving and looking up at the screens in the port court. Watching a rather intense match happening. Man oh man. Major T is running into some heavy opposition. Peyton said before munching on a hamburger. Sarah nodded and said, yeah. Codemaster Tyrisis's Mercoac has been a real problem. Wasn't that the tentacled creature he beat you with, Peyton? Kaz asked the slightly more experienced player. Who agreed and called it a beast on par with Marillion's. So what's happening now? Tom's battling Codemaster Tyrisis. Izuku asked as Tom in the drome was casting a music with his Nagerin. Song of Future Sight, the genie called out before being coded. Sarah and Peyton realized they hadn't really brought Izuku up to speed on the Codemasters outside of their names and minor referencing. Yeah, Tom's up against one of the leaders of Chaotic. We talked about them being the ones who banished Clay and Cristela before. But a major part of what they do is to act as like boss challenges for players. Sarah's right. They have the rarest and craziest kinds of scans in the game. And they're the best at strategizing in all kinds of ways. And our boy Tom has toppled 3 of them so far. Peyton explained after Sarah. Kaz continued by explaining the rules in which a Codemaster or player could challenge one another. Noting that at least 7 wins in a specific battle drome were needed for either possibility to happen. And if you manage to beat a Codemaster, you get a special location scan from them. Letting you go to there and scan all kinds of things. Like that creature up on Tom's board. Izuku looked up and saw an Antidean and a strange hefty cat-like creature with 2 long fangs. That creature is called Smilden. You can only find him in Prexer Chasm. That was the first scan Tom won. Kaz said as Tom picked his next location. Or rather he used the other capability of Future Sight to set up his next location. Antidean attacks Skevorik at the Cuvian Caves. Tom announces with a smirk. Turning into the duck man creature with a smirk. While his opponent a lizard-like monster whose art showed it sticking to walls. About the same size as Mercoac, but this one seemed more at home in a hot or volcanic area. given the fire burning from its eyes and the limbs that seemed to drip burning sap or lava. And that was what Tom was counting on. Once the battle began, steam seemed to erupt from the creature as it was forced to flail around. Only to be blasted by Tom and the ship he was piloting, the Nemesis. And thus, the Codemaster's creature was quickly reduced to code. I should have known you might try something trickier. I even remember seeing that location from your faux match against Kid Chire. But tell me, why did you go after Skavorik instead of one of my other creatures? Tiresias asked with a smirk behind his helmet. Tom returned it by saying, because I think I know what you've been doing during the match. Murkoak has stayed right in the center of the board and been beating me down with all the elements and pretty high DSPLN attacks the whole time. And you've only moved the other creatures around him. But the biggest clue I had was when I beat a different one that was next to it. Suddenly, Murkoak stopped doing water attacks. That's because it's getting powered up by the others. Correct on all counts, Major Tom. Murkoak's ability lets it use the elements and a portion of the DSPLN scores from all the allied creatures on the board. So what do you intend to do next? Tiresias asked with a narrowed gaze. Tom let out a breath before noting that he would take the battle in a new direction. And to that end, he pulled Antidean back along with Smilden and his revived Vlar at the rear, forcing Tiresias to move his creatures forward to engage Tom's. Attacking Antidean with an Earth user Garapko and defeating him. But Tom was able to counter with his Smilden and the use of Geo Flourish and Ballad of the Belittled once his opponent's disciplines were reduced enough. As Tom moved his Vlar forward, Tiresias was forced to move his second-to-last creature forward as well. Namely, the Wind Attacker Hericher. A bird-like creature that attacked Tom's Vlar from the sky with a jetpack that amplified air and fire attacks. Well, that's great. Just need to wait for the moment. Vlar said while hopping and jetting around the trees of the location. His moment comes when the bird dives at him with a hammer dash attack. Vlar backflips just in time and swipes the jetpack off of his opponent. Didn't know I could do that, did you? Well, here's something else you might not expect. Whirlwind Scythes. Vlar shouts as several blades cut and strike the back of Hericher. Which not only causes damage but weakens the power of the creature as well. It tries to strike back with a Sirocco attack. Thanks to the stolen jetpack though, Vlar easily evades and unleashes a powered-up Ash Torrent and then an Inferno Gust attacks to code the large bird. Clever move, Major Tom. But now I wonder what your next move will be. Tiresias said with intrigue as he was down to his last creature. And it was Tom's attack. He spun the location randomizer and hoped the last location was the one he was hoping for. Smiling slightly, a Prexer chasm popped up. Smilden attacks Murkoak. Tom says while putting his hand up to the screen. Becoming the cat-like ancient beast from the chasm itself. Let's get chaotic, Major Tom. Tiresias says with a bit of gurgling from his creature self. As the pair were transported to their possible final battle location. Outside of the drome, Izuku was humming and wondering how Tom figured out what the Codemaster was up to. He's done this a few times with his other matches. Figuring out how Chromax kept coming back, piecing together a way to code all of Hotek's revived creatures at once, and figuring out Churl's music and magician draining strategy to the side and turn it against her. Kaz notes. Smiling while thinking about how his best friend helped him with his own Codemaster victory. It's part of why Tom's become kind of famous. No one else can say that they've battled or beaten as many Codemasters as he has. Though I wonder what he's betting on with Prexer Chasm. Sarah said before looking back up at the match in progress. Within, Smilden was blasting away with a few attacks as Murkoak fired back with a few of his own. It's not as strong as before. But it still hits hard. I didn't bring us here for no reason though. Tom thinks after using a shock blade attack on a few of the surrounding trees. Pinning his opponent's limbs. And just in time for what Tom had been waiting on. The blight of Prexer Chasm. It roared as it made its way to attack the pair of creatures. Murkoak's eyes were wide as the disease-like entity started blorping and squirming its way toward them. Trying to use attacks to free itself. No good. I'm not strong enough now. Tiresias thought as he only cracked a few of the large trees off his limbs. Smilden meanwhile smiled as he started climbing up the side of the chasm and protecting himself with a few of the crystals that lined the cliffs. Stopping the Blight's attacks. But Tiresias wasn't as lucky. And was quickly overwhelmed by the mass of green and purple. Ending the match with Tom's victory. Not many were celebrating back in the port court though. Mostly because it wasn't a bombastic end most of them had been hoping for to close the match. Instead, it seemed more like, it's not like he cheated. Yeah. But still, it wasn't quite the same as when he fought Krellin or Hotek. It's a little like the Amazon match, but less impressive, a few players around the court said. Ha. Well, that was certainly an interesting way to end the match. And very clever. I see why Codemaster Krellin has had his eyes on you. Not to worry, Major Tom. I'm not one for making it hard for the victors of my matches to get to their new locations. You have earned this. Tiresias said before pushing a series of buttons on his Codemaster scanner. And Tom was given a scan of a special group of islands. One that Tiresias noted he'd find several large and impressive creatures among the archipelago location gifted. May it serve you well in future matches. No matter what form those take. And with that Tiresias lowers down into his drone. As he was finishing his descent, a person calls out to him from behind. So. Do you still have doubts about his potential? Krellin says with his hands behind his back. Tiresias sighs slightly before addressing his friend. No. He has proven himself to me with this victory of his. If he had lost again, then I might have stayed opposed. But he was clever in how he took the battle his direction. Good to hear, Terence. Now it just comes down to if Major Tom feels he is ready, I suppose. Krellin said as the pair adjourned to talk with the other Codemasters. While this was happening, Tom was being congratulated by his friends. As well as a few other watchers of his match. Slick Nick, Shinwan, and a handful of others who knew Tom congratulated him before his main friends. Nicely done, bro. That's Codemaster number 4 under your belt. Peyton said with a clap on Tom's shoulders. Kaz said much the same, and Izuku noted how creative it was how he used locations to defeat his opponents. Let alone that crafty strategy of using Vlar to steal your opponent's gear and power up your attacks. Tom chuckles before admitting it was only possible if Vlar didn't have gear. That's why I wasn't upset when he first got coded, he said before giving Sarah a look. Both looked like they wanted to do or say more. But they were in public and their two older friends reminded them about that matter. Sarah cleared her throat and said, "Great job as ever, Tom. Now you've got a cool new location, right?" Right. Here it is. Tom said before showing the location in question. It was called the Kalkuran Archipelago. So, this is where Codemaster Tiresias got all of his crazy big beasts and whatnot? Peyton asked with some excitement. Mostly because he was never sure where the creatures that beat him were from. Kaz was excited too and wished he could go with his best friend. Last time we did that, you ended up blabbing the secret of Dranaki's threshold to everyone. Sarah's biting comment made Kaz wince while Izuku looked on in confusion. Tom noticed this and suggested that they all take their seats at their usual table. Before recounting the story of the threshold and various troubles that came with it. After hearing the whole story rather than parts of it, Izuku had to agree it was Kaz's fault. You didn't really think that through, did you? He asked with a raised eyebrow Kaz's direction. Who grumbled and tried to say it wasn't his fault. Kaz, be serious. This is kind of the same problem back home. You're so obsessed with chaotic and trying to prove it's real that everyone sees you as crazy. You almost had all of your chaotic stuff taken because of it. What's wrong with trying to prove it's real? Kaz shouted in frustration. This time Sarah and Peyton had to point out the problems with trying to prove chaotic's existence. Namely, how he wasn't actually transported to the world of chaotic, just a mental copy of himself. And anyone who could or might corroborate his story would be written off as being asked prior that they agree with him. Izuku gives Kaz a look. But then it changes to slight understanding gaze before saying, "Why do you want to prove it's real so badly?" "Because honestly, it almost feels like you're wanting is what I've gone through in wishing to be a hero in my world." Kaz and all of the older teens were wide-eyed hearing Izuku's point. The redhead sat back before pulling up his glasses to rub his eyes. "That's not inaccurate. I wish everyone really understood just how cool not just the game but chaotic itself really is. And, well, I want to prove it's real so everyone knows I'm not crazy." Tom looked down upon hearing that before sighing and looking at Izuku again. He hummed and thought about a number of things. Something Izuku picked up on and asked him about. "It's you know what, Izuku? How about you and I go on a scan quest? Let's go to Rock River Canyon. I want to show you something special." Sure Tom. I guess I could be up for that. But don't you want to check out your new location first?" Izuku said with some confusion. Tom waved it off by saying he could do that later, hurrying Izuku off to the transport center. The rest of his friends though were confused. What was that all about? Hayden asked and Kaz just shrugged. Sarah though had something of an idea from all the times she and Tom had talked. Wonder why he asked Izuku. Maybe because he's not from our world, she thought before saying she was going to head home. With Izuku and Tom though, they quickly made their way through the location and explored a special region of the canyon. "So this is the Crystal Cave. Cool location," Izuku says before trying to get a scan. Tom stops him though and says, "Save your location scan for somewhere else." He then guides Izuku to Akarak Cavern and the strange low-gravity field it generated. After Izuku had some fun moon leaping around the location, Tom told Izuku the story of the place and what it somewhat meant to him. "This was where I stopped Simon and his crew from destroying locations." "So does that have something to do with why you've been a bit uneasy when talking about some Codemaster things? Like what are they looking to make you one or something?" Izuku asks while the location scan was running. And the grunt and then seeing Tom looking down told him he was correct. He tries to backpedal and say he wouldn't say anything or that it wasn't a big deal. "No it is. And that's some of the problem. And why I wanted to talk to you Izuku," Tom said before taking a seat on the upper rocks of the cavern. He patted the spot next to him before talking with Izuku more on the matter. How Krellin had initially come to him in his player guise to talk with him more on the matter. Saying, "Krellin or Curtis thought I would be perfect to take up the position because of all the different kinds of good I've done. Helping creatures in Parim, stopping Clay and other dangerous players' plans and scams, even protecting locations and similar even with no reward. But you're uneasy because of the responsibility and other things. Feeling like you aren't worthy of a position of leadership like the Codemasters. You'd maybe rather stick to just being a good friend and helper in the day-to-day of chaotic. Like you did for me and a number of other newbies. Right?" Izuku's description and insight makes Tom chuckle before leaning back. "Izuku, be honest. As someone who enjoys chaotic, someone who's been a hero with the very powers we only get in the game, and someone who knows me maybe not well, but knows me as a mentor, do you really think I can do this?" The green teen doesn't hesitate. He gives a quick yes and noted that Tom might be able to do even more for chaotic, the players, and maybe even Parim itself if he took up the position of Codemaster. "I just hope you'll still have time to show me more things. Codemaster Tom." Izuku teases while looking over the first few things he scanned while traveling with Tom and Kaz. Tom gets a laugh at Izuku's joke before looking over at the scans from Izuku's first scan quest. "Thanks Izuku. Listen, how about we get you a special creature for your deck? I have someone special I want to see and in mind," Tom says before telling Izuku to set up for Kiru City. The two meet up at the overworld arsenal where Izuku assumes he was going to scan Bodil or his assistant. Nope. We're headed up there. Tom says before pointing to the castle at the center Kiru city. Izuku gulps as he follows his friend and mentor up the stairs to the castle. And once there, they are greeted by Intress and Zalik. Tom. Good to see you. This is the boy I've met, yes. Is there some pressing matter afoot? Intress says with some unease. Tom chuckles and says that luckily it wasn't like that today. I was hoping to talk with Maxer about something if he's in. Also, well, let's just say Izuku here is a big fan of him too. The Beetle Man and Tiger Woman share a look before shrugging and opening the doors to the castle. Izuku is awed by everything around him as they are moving through the palace. And his jaw fully drops when they enter Maxer's study. Who greets the pair cordially. It's good to see you, my young friend. And an even younger friend, I hope, the leader of the overworld says with a smile directed Izuku's way. He gulps and then shakes Maxer's hand and says he was a big fan. Using your scan really helped me to save a number of people. Let alone the others in my world. This surprises the creatures and they ask what he meant. Leading to Izuku giving a retelling of how he found out he could turn into creatures in his world. With both Intress and Maxer being exceptionally proud of the boy for his actions in saving Eri and others. Actually, Maxer, I was thinking he could use a new scan of you. Maybe with more of your help, he can save even more. Let alone helping to inspire me. Tom explained before asking to talk with his creature idol alone. Maxer nods and says, it would be an honor to help a young hero like Izuku. And I think you'll be quite interested to find out the newest capabilities I have. Izuku smiles and gets his scanner out to capture the overworld leader's code. His eyes bugging out when he saw that Maxer had water as one of his elements alongside fire and earth. Tom whistles and noted that he wouldn't mind that scan either. But I wanted to talk to you about something special, Maxer. Intress nods and escorts Izuku out to the palace music library for a rare new music to use. So what is it you wanted to talk about, Tom? Maxer asked with some intrigue. Tom cleared his throat before telling Maxer about his recent Codemaster match. Not only coming out victorious and gaining a new location to explore. But I've also been offered a chance to become a Codemaster myself. To sort of lead my fellow chaotic players. The green humanoid was surprised but congratulated Tom on his potential leadership position. At least until he noticed Tom's face. You're not sure if you are ready or worthy of such a position, yes? Maxer questioned with a light smile. Tom nodded and said that Izuku had given his side as someone who had been helped by Tom more than once. But I also wanted the advice of someone who knows what it means to lead. And that's you. Maxer smiled slightly and closed his eyes. I know all too well about those thoughts, Tom. I thought and felt those same things myself back when I took over leadership of the tribe from my father. They never truly go away, but you must face each day like you might a battle. Ready for whatever comes and to make decisions. Good or bad. But know that I am proud of what you've done for Perrin. And proud to call you a friend. Tom's eyes get a little misty hearing that and thanks his creature friend. Shaking his hand before going to find Izuku again. Who was celebrating at having gotten a fluid fugue music to complement his new water attacking Maxer. The pair chuckle before thanking the overworlders again and porting back to chaotic. Once there, Izuku saved his new scans while Tom called Peyton and Kaz. Finally telling them about what he'd been offered. To say they were floored would be an understatement. But Tom managed to put enough of a lid on them to mention something important. Listen, no one knows who the Codemasters really are. So, and this is really for you, Kaz, keep this quiet. Especially if I can put together something while I'm in the council. That's fair. And I'll try to think of it like the secret of Apera's home. But are you 100% on Peyton too? Remember that whole Codemaster Hotek affair? Kaz said with a raised eyebrow. Peyton grunted and agreed with Kaz that he messed up there. But, I've got the sense to not let this out. It'll be locked up tight. Oh wait, does Sarah know already? Tom cleared his throat and admitted she did. Before awkwardly admitting they were together. Yeah, we know. Not the best kept secret, bro. Kaz and Peyton responded, causing Tom to face fault and let out a strained laugh. As Izuku ran up, they talked about a few more things involving chaotic. Least of which was a little plan Tom had for the future. Once that was done, and the others had ported back home, Tom made his way to the beta-drome. He let out a tense breath before going into one of the battle sections. He skimmed through his scanner to find a special card that Codemaster Krellin had sent him. Once at the docking station, Tom placed his scanner and clicked on the card in question. Electricity seemed to flow all around and light shone beneath him. As he was lowered into the drome and hidden meeting place of the Codemasters. So you have come, Major Tom. Codemaster Krellin said as he and the other Codemasters were lit up before the teen. Tom gulped as he looked upon the 7 leaders of chaotic. Hotek and Amzin, even with their masks on, looked annoyed by his presence. Imther, Tyrasis, and Krellin seemed to approve. Churl and Oran seemed more neutral but a bit inclined toward approval. I take it you've made your decision, Tom Majors? Imther says behind his orange mask. Tom nods and says, I have. If the offer is still open, I will become the next Codemaster of Chaotic. The Codemasters share looks and speak among themselves for a moment. But the decision is made. With 5-2 voting to induct Tom as a new Codemaster. Krellin comes down and addresses the teen he'd taken an interest in. I knew you had something special when I met you in Param that day. Congratulations again, Tom. Or rather, Codemaster Krellin, the man says before handing Tom a card like the one he used to show who he was in the beta-drome long ago. Tom gingerly reaching out and taking it. And the uniform of the Codemaster in question flowed over him. You can't be serious about this, Major Tom. Codemaster Hotek says while at a meeting of the Codemasters 2 weeks after Tom joined their ranks. And he was currently arguing with one of the more prickly and dogged members of the group. Tom narrowed his eyes behind his mask before saying, last time I checked, I am a Codemaster equal to you. Or would you rather I refer to you by your true name? Horst. Codemaster Amzin then brings forward that the rest of them had seniority over Tom in this matter. At least until Imther clapped his hands loudly. That is enough, you two. You may not have agreed, but our current Codemaster Krellin has earned the right to be here. And was chosen by the vote of the other Codemasters, the man says with an annoyed glare directed the pair's way. Tyrasis then says, what's more, I believe our new Codemaster's idea has merit. Given what has happened previously. Codemaster Krellin. The floor is yours again. Codemaster Oran and Churl agree and gesture to the young man. Who nods before thanking his colleagues. What I'm proposing might be seen as extreme, I won't deny that. But I do think it is necessary. We need to have ways to keep an eye on certain players and their actions. Otherwise, it could lead to massively disastrous effects on the game and especially Param. Tom outlines the incidents involving Simon and his gang, Clay and Kristella's attempt to hand over the secret of Dranaki's threshold, and several players like Sam Shady who had left or led new players in dangerous situations. Situations that a number of players never came back from. I'm not saying we can't compete for scans. Be that with challenge matches, betting said scans, or trying to get to a piece of gear or a creature first. But we need to establish something to keep an eye out for the more dangerous types of players. Especially if they cause damage to Param. Oran's head was tilted down before he said, I agree with your point about the damage they could cause. If we anger too many of the creatures because of a few reckless and greedy fools like Simon, then Param would become infinitely more dangerous than it already is. Because we humans would be hunted for the destruction others have caused. That seemed to bring a few more into seeing Tom's point. Hotek and Amzin though were still opposed. This game is competitive PRD. We can't just hand-hold every newbie who gets lucky enough to get their code sent to them. We're all expected to take the same risks. Look at the previous Krellin's record when it came to Prexer Chasm and the players who traveled there. Amzen says with some venom in her voice. Tom takes a breath before agreeing to some of the only female members' point. But at the same time, there are certain things we should keep more of an eye out for. Like certain players trying to steal entire decks right as a new player shows up. Or helping with matters in certain locations if necessary. Imther raises an eyebrow at that before questioning Tom's point. You all know about that scan I have of Prexer Chasm. The one with the blight. That entity caused a large amount of damage and continued to grow after I scanned the location. It took working with a caretaker to purge the blight and help Smilden and the other creatures. So you want us to get involved with every little problem that comes up in Param? Hotek snidely asked. Churl gave Tom a side-eyed glance before questioning if they would make it obvious that they were being watched by a Codemaster chosen group. And other than banishment, what would you suggest for a punishment? The questions caught Tom a bit off guard, so he stammered for a moment. To the delight of Hotek and Amzen. But their frowns returned when Tom admitted his idea hadn't gotten that far yet. Currently, I'm just wanting to bring the idea forward before the rest of the Council of Codemasters. And as far as what our agents might look like, I don't think they should be obvious. Instead, they can just seem like well-meaning players or similar. Heck, they could even be a bit sneaky or similar, so long as they act in a way that can put away the most dangerous players. Imther, Oron, Churl, and Tyresis seem to be contemplating the matter more. While Hotek and Amzen continue to voice their opposition for Tom's idea. Enough of that. I believe it would be best for all of us to think about this matter more. And, we should consider true counters or contributions to this plan Codemaster Krellin has suggested. Adjourned. Imther says before clapping once again. Tom lets out a sigh before stepping back and away from the conference table. As he is walking back towards his drome, he is joined by Imther. Not quite what you were expecting when you joined our group, is it? The man joked with a smile behind his mask. The new Codemaster bows his head slightly and his annoyance shows on his mask. No. Then again, I guess most Codemasters don't get involved unless it's time for a player to challenge. That or banishing someone, the young man says while walking. Imther nods before saying, the truth is, we do have these meetings regularly. But we rarely have to deal with new ideas or similar things. Often it's just a matter of reporting our performance as Codemasters and noting how many new players have arrived. We've never had someone put forth an idea as a punitive force or something like that. I knew it would not be a well-liked idea, but I do think it could be useful and necessary. There's a lot of people who have died or gotten into similar trouble because of shifty or dangerous players. Let alone the effects we players can have on Param. Why is it so strange of an idea? As Tom vents out his frustration at his idea, Imther hums slightly. He then tells his young colleague, it's mainly because we never really had to worry the same way. When Curtis and I started, there technically were no Codemasters. So to speak. And the creatures barely noticed us. Seeing us as oddities, myth etc. But times have been changing. The newest Codemaster's eyes widened upon hearing that, and he asked what Imther meant that there were originally no Codemasters. And his senior explained that when he and a number of the first few through Chaotic arrived, the Drome MSTR itself had created tests for the initial choosing of Codemasters. I was the very first who earned the true position of Codemaster. And each of the others did the same. The Codemasters have been the same for almost a decade now, and we earned the position by passing the tests. Not that most players know this. And it is because of this, that Hotek and Amzen don't want to change. Be that new Codemasters being chosen or trying to modify the way things are handled in Chaotic. They want it to be the Chaotic they've always known. Maybe so. But that doesn't mean they're right. Especially with how the situation in Param has changed. Tom says before thanking Imther for the information and perspective. I can understand to a point. To them, this is still just a game and everything. And they want to keep enjoying things as they are. But I know the game and we players have had more of an influence than we used to. The matter with the Marillions might have been avoided if we had told the Underworlders about Felfer. Or maybe not. Tom mulls these thoughts over before reviewing the last few matches in his drome and considering who has really earned a right to challenge him as a codemaster. Before finally settling on one he was surprised had 7 wins in the drome. Well, Tank. Let's see if I can show you that you still aren't as impressive as you think you are. Krellin says before shifting to a professional manner to issue his challenge. While Tom was dealing with the unexpected politics of being a codemaster, Izuku was just going through day-to-day in Mustafa. Mostly by attending normal classes in an average high school. But when his chaotic self returned after classes let out, he smirked before slipping away to do some hero/vigilante work. Now let's try a Danian. Or rather a few of them. Izuku thinks aloud before slipping towards the woods. He puts Wama in one of the front points before setting his Dylas in the rear. And last Kelvedrin. 2 mandiblers bolstered by Dylas' ability. And with an elemental coral, I'd get 3 elements for the Danian I use. Need to give one of them a Doomhammer for some earth power. With his 3-person team set, Izuku gives a smirk before saying, let's get chaotic, and transforming into Kelvedrin. He then took to moving around with leaps aided by the wings on the Danian's back. And not realizing how far he'd gone from the city until it was a little late. The gliding ant scratched his head before saying, guess I got carried away. Well, it's fine. I'll just explore around, huh? While he was thinking aloud, he picked up on scents and sounds that made him uneasy. Leaping in the direction of some rumbling in smoke. He comes upon a sight that angers him. A group of people were attacking those who seemed to be extreme heteromorphic types and quirkless who were trying to protect or help them. It doesn't matter that they look different. They don't deser one man said before being blasted by a flame emitter. Why should we care was soulless piece of garbage thinks. We'll purge you all, the woman leading the group said while flames were in her hands. Izuku grit his teeth/mandibles and leapt in while unleashing a lightning burst in front of the mob. He snarled slightly while standing before them and then using a tornado tackle to blast his foes backwards. The woman leading snarled back while bracing herself from the winds. Have a taste of this bug, she shouted before launching some fireballs at Izuku. He covered himself and felt the impacts. And was surprised that it didn't hurt that much. In fact, the flames seemed to roll off of him. He wasn't the only one surprised, but his foe recovered and ordered an earth user to attack him as well. And yet again, Izuku was able to resist the attack before firing back with an Arise blast. That's right. Kelvedrin is fire and earth proof if his enemies have those elements. Izuku thinks before smiling. You think those make you strong? Well, what if someone could gain powers greater than your own? Elemental coral. Grant me strength. Izuku calls out while holding the music aloft. The humans observing were stunned and questioned what was happening as the music played. And they were stunned when Kelvedrin opened his hands again and flames shot from one palm. And with a stomp, he created an ice wall to protect the others. How is that possible? You were shooting lightning and wind before. And now you can, COLDD, the woman shouted before being blasted by a freeze flash attack. He then rushed the Earth Quirk villain with a hammer dash and then a winter claw attack to knock him out. Then the Danian used a blaze barrage and electric rain attacks to knock out, knock away, or disable the rest of the mob. Once done, he turned back to check on those injured. Using a bit of ice, water, and even plants to help patch up a few of them. Sorry, I can't do more. Did you call the police? Izuku asked a mouse-faced person. Who nodded and asked who he was. The young man smiled slightly but didn't give an exact name. Call me what you want. Just a bug man looking to help some folks. Good luck. And with that, Izuku leaps off as the sirens announce the arrival of the police. He leaps and glides a few times before landing near the city. and chooses to switch to Wama for his next creature. Man. This guy could stand to work out a bit more. Izuku says while adjusting the large gut that Wama had. He wanders around for a while before seeing if the insect creature could stick to surfaces like other bugs. Okay, here we, no. I've almost, nope. Lost it. Maybe I can just CRP. Izuku thinks aloud while trying it a few times. And he finally gave up after the fifth fall on his back. Grumbling before wandering around and listening for trouble. But finding very little. Which had an odd effect on him. His human self was a little annoyed and unsettled by the outcome, but the Danian he currently was enjoyed the matter. The boy feeling like letting out a sigh of relief and smiling that there was no trouble. He could just take it easy. Okay, now Wama's laziness is influencing me. Gotta shake this off and trouble. Izuku think while his body was reclining in a construction zone. But then he heard some of the machinery breaking and chose to act. As he spotted a crane cable fraying and the heavy girders that were being lifted, now were falling out towards some of the workers. The large bug hurried forward before calling out, grounding grapple. Creating a spectral hand that wrapped around the falling beams before hitting the men. With Wama moving his hand to the side to set the metal down. Letting out a few tense breaths before looking up at the crane. The men he saved came over and thanked him before heroes arrived to help the injured. This makes Izuku narrow his eyes at the fact they seemed to be ready. Especially when said heroes were not from the same district as the construction zone. Something to look into later. Izuku thought before the heroes gave him a slight glare. Confirming a few suspicions before they told him he was under arrest for illegal quirk usage. The bug man rolls his eyes before shouting, "Ash torrent. Smoke surge," to create a big enough smokescreen to escape. Help that he turned back into his human self after leaving the construction zone. Okay. That could have gone a bit better. And now I have to investigate a few heroes who might be making accidents happen to boost their rep. Izuku slips to an alley a few blocks away from the construction zone and becomes dialyzed to test the Danian's music possibilities. But again, there was little for him to try while looking for trouble. Something's off. There's almost too few villains out. It's like they're waiting for something. Dialyz thinks aloud while walking along a wall. Turns out, the reason he couldn't with Wama was mostly because the mandibler never chose to practice said skill and was so heavy he couldn't really be kept aloft. Dialyz though was of thinner build and had practiced walking on walls. Mostly due to pacing while considering new music possibilities. Of said music was an unbalancing battle song he used to defeat one villain while wandering. Capturing said man to ask what he knew. Me? I don't know nothing. Whoa, okay. I don't really know much. I'm serious. Please don't drop me, the thug said after he'd been drained of energy to try and threaten the Muge. And said Muge had gotten stronger thanks to the music. Now he was threatening the man to ask why it was so quiet in Mustafa while he was tied up with silk from a web cocoon attack. After enough prodding, Izuku got part of an answer before leaving the man for the authorities. So, there's something big going down before long. And a bunch of villains all wanted in on it. But since he didn't want in, he wasn't told any more of the plan. But I might be able to find out what is going on. Izuku thinks while pacing along the side of a building. Though he's also unsettled that he was so comfortable doing that due to being a Danian. He shook his head before walking to the top of the building he was on. And becoming himself again. Scanning through his deck for the Song of Future Sight and resetting his battle team with a creature that had a musician. One quick transformation into Vidav, and Izuku was ready. Song of Future Sight. Show me the danger that is on the horizon for Mustafa. Vidav said while holding up the music and calling out his musician. And he is then flooded with a series of images. An attack on the hero students of UA. The hero teachers being overwhelmed. Even All Might could barely stand against the villains and a pair of monsters they had brought to fight him. Izuku looked down in an unsettled way and questioned what he should do next. It seems we keep bumping into each other. Magic Cat-san. Izuku heard behind him and turned to see the youthful heroine recovery girl. The boy face-palming slightly before asking how she found him. Mostly coincidence. There's a clinic in this building, I help it sometimes. And I felt a strange energy before coming up here. I take it that was your doing. Yeah. Something like that. Izuku sidestepped before covering his face slightly. Before remembering that he didn't look like himself. Really gotta get used to that, he thought to himself. Recovery girl hobbled over to the creature before asking, so what or who is it you are healing today? The Lynx man was surprised, and recovery girl said, don't be too surprised. I suspected you had something to do with saving several lives a few months ago. And for that I thank you. But you shouldn't be using your quirk like that. I'm certain an agency or hospital would take you on. Or are you uneasy because of your appearance? Izuku gave her a strange look before realizing she was talking about heteromorphic discrimination. I guess it would make sense. And under normal circumstances, she might be right. But these aren't normal. Izuku thinks before telling the hero what was going on. My abilities are a bit more complicated than you might realize. After all, I'm not using a quirk purse. And what I recently did, well. You work at UA, yes, the creature says with a look towards the old woman. She narrowed her eyes before acknowledging that. He then let out a breath before warning her that something was coming for those at UA. You might say I have a way to be like Sir Night Eye. The ability to glimpse the future. And what I saw, told me that All Might was going to be overwhelmed by a mass attack of villains and monsters. Vidav conveys while making his way towards the edge of the building. RG is stunned by this and asked what else he could tell her. There is little more I can say. But I refuse to let that possibility come to pass. Izuku says while turning back towards her. And then gently stepping off the edge of the building and using an ice sheet attack to slide down and away. Shocking the little woman even more. Once he was far enough away, Izuku started contemplating the possibilities of what he could do. It won't happen for a few days. So I have some time to prepare. But not much. Looks like I've got a few scan quests to go on. Izuku thinks aloud as he transforms back into himself. So alright folks, that's all for today. Stay tuned for more crossovers. Do subscribe, like and share for more such videos. Also check out the story and author HanBaron on FANFICTIONnet. Press the bell icon to be notified first on release. See you in the next video, till then goodbye.